Okay, so here is a piece of reflector. I guess it's not reflector, insulation foil, whatever. What's it called, Porter?
Insulation, reflector insulation, that works.
Okay, so I had cut this to 16.5 by 16.5. I like to take the actual measurements that we're doing and add a 1/2 inch to both measurements, just to, you don't want to be short, so whatever. Anyway, I used rulers and square to cut them, so it's good square, good measurement. And then what I do have is I cut this template over the window itself. So I placed this over the window so that this edge lined up on one edge and this lined up on the perpendicular edge. And I traced this, cut it out, and double checked it to make sure that it fit the window. This will be used as a template to cut the corners after we get the fabric attached. Now I pre-cut fabric. I don't know. Oh, there it is. So I'm just using a really thin cotton broadcloth this time. You do see the foil through it, so if you want something where you absolutely cannot see the foil, use something a little bit thicker. We've actually already made our entire set of these, so this is just for demonstration purposes. So the next thing we're going to do is bond this to this. And I like to do it on the curved side here because basically when I put it up on the window, I want it to hold itself flat. If I go like this, the magnets are going to peel away from the window. So the fabric side is the side that faces into the RV. So I'm going to glue it on that side of it. Okay, so I'm using Super 77 that is probably 5 or 6 years old right now and desperately in need of being cleaned. So what's going to happen when I spray this is there's going to be globs of glue. It's going to look ugly, but I'm just showing you the technique. Basically, you're going to want a clean nozzle on yours, and you don't want globs of glue being sprayed out. But whatever, this is basic technique. So I'm going to spray it down. You want a good coating. But you see there, you can see the blobs. You can always like sponge them up a little bit, but I find it just makes a giant mess. But there we go. So now we're going back to the other table. Okay, so here's my glued piece of foil. I'm going to lay my fabric out. Now, if you have a right side and a wrong side to your fabric, put the right side down. This is broadcloth, so it really doesn't matter. And I cut the fabric to just slightly bigger than the piece that we're covering. And just press it down. Flip it over and you see this has a big wrinkle in it. I did not bother ironing. So what I do is I just pull it out. You put some tension on it, it pulls the wrinkles out. You just want to make sure there's no air pockets. You know, it's not a stretchy fabric, but it's stretchy enough that you can pull out any slack or whatever. So when you're happy with how it is, and I mean, yeah, there's still, you might want to iron your fabrics first. Whatever, I don't. So that's nice there. Flip it back over and I'm going to trim all the excess fabric off. Okay, now we've got this. Now the template that I cut earlier, this side. So what you want to do is line it up so that both of these edges line up with the actual edge of the foil. As you can see here, there's a little bit of fabric overhanging. So I'm going to line it up with the actual foil piece. And I'm just going to sketch that edge. Now once you put the bias tape on it, it's not going to be perfect. Like it's not going to hold that perfect edge. It'll be off a bit, but you just want to try and get it as close to possible, as close to it as possible. You need a big, thick, like a wide bias tape to do this. because you do have a certain thickness that it has to go around. And that you sacrifice a bit of accuracy with the big wide stuff. That is my fourth one. So then I'm going to go back and trim this. Now you could have done that when you cut the foil before you put the fabric on, but I find it easier to just do them together like this. And this is honestly fussier than you really need it to be, because depending on how your windows are covered, like we've got curtains, you're not even going to see the corners. So if you have a rounded window corner like this, you can just do a square corner. It doesn't really matter. This is just going to like completely cover it exactly how it is. So then we sew. So I've got here is 1 inch bias tape. This one has like 2 little folds like this. I don't use that. I just basically fold this in half. This was the only one I could get that was wide enough to go around that. So you want it to fold like this. And there's some spray glue on the end there, so I'm going to cut that off before I get started. So I've got my machine set to wide zigzag. Just want to make sure everything's good. Wide zigzag, fairly long stitch length. Now this I can do by myself because it's a small one, but when you get to big, large windows, it can really help if you've got someone holding the other side of it. Like when I had the big living room window ones, I had to have my husband actually holding the bulk of it and just holding it up while I sewed and helping me turn it, because it can get a little bit unwieldy. But for the sake of demonstration, we're going to do this. So I'm folding it so that the halfway point is right over the end here. It doesn't have to be perfect. And honestly, if you're worried that it's not going to look perfect, don't use a contrasting bias tape. You could just use white, or if you're doing a black inside, it doesn't matter. I use white because it makes the inside of your RV look bigger than if you were to use a dark color like black. So I don't start right on the corner, but I start near a corner. Fold that together, and you're going to aim to have your zigzag just on the edge here and in. So you want to secure it, and you're aiming to secure through both levels of it. So you're going to stretch this over. Bias tape stretches a bit, so when you go through the curve, you're going to go like this and then stretch it, and it'll curve around it. So right now we just want to kind of hold it in place. You want this held tight against the piece. So I can start sewing. And then as I come to the curve, as I said, I'm stretching it around. I'm still aiming to have the halfway, not point, but halfway line over the edge. And keep this as tight as keep the bias tape as tight as possible against the rest of it, just because otherwise this can come away and then you're not stitching to it and it can be a bit of a mess. You can always fix it after, but the more accurate you can get on the first go, the easier it is overall. And I do give it a little bit of a stretch as I go, just to avoid any bulking out here. Like I don't stretch it as much as I do around the corner. So again, coming to the corner, giving it a bit of a stretch around. And I should mention, there's a good chance your sewing machine's not going to like this. It's not going to like this more than anything. So it might skip stitches. It's still, as long as you've got it held in, the fabric's going to hold better than any like glue or tape or anything else. So I just deal with it. Like, as you can see here, you kind of have to jerk it around. I don't know how well that shows up on camera. It's not perfect. I wouldn't sell this to a client, but you know what? It covers and it keeps the heat out and it keeps the light out and it's good for privacy and everything else. So I'll deal with it. And it's a lot prettier than just putting the silver up itself. The feed dogs under your foot are not going to like this either, the foil, so you definitely have to pull it with your left hand, and that's part of why your stitches aren't going to be perfect, because your machine tends to, it's built that it feeds itself through. So when you're pulling it through, it doesn't like that. As you can see, the curves are good. You know, they're not necessarily 100% accurate to the actual curve, but it'll cover it. That's what you want. You don't want any extra light coming through. So otherwise, that's a lot of work for nothing. I kind of screwed up here. I stitched too far off of off the end here, so I just take it off and reposition it. Let's stretch it again. I'm just going to trim this. Now, when you come to the end, you can fold it under and have a really nice end if you want. I usually don't bother. This is very, very utilitarian for me. I will usually just sew over the end here to stitch that down. And now, as you can see here, this came right off the end of the foil. You want to avoid that, and that's why you hold it really tight against it. But you can learn from my mistakes, because you know what? If I'd done this perfectly, you wouldn't have any examples of what not to do. But there you go. Now, what you do want to do is go around and make sure that you actually caught all of it with your stitches. Because if this came loose, if you didn't have enough tucked under, there might be some that's not actually stitched down to the foil side. But that is not the case this time around. So the next step is going to be